Call Mike Nesbitt, Chair of the Committee for the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. To speak as Committee Chair to begin with, may I record that the Committee was briefed by officials on the 13-14 opening budget and June monitoring on its meeting on the 29th of May this year. A meeting, of course, which should have allowed members time to consider the Department's position. Unfortunately, some papers were received just 30 minutes prior to the committee's meeting, and I note the criticism from the chair of the ETI committee on a similar issue. 30 minutes left the committee insufficient time to consider the proposals in any detail, Deputy Speaker. As a one-off, perhaps something you could ignore, but it is a recurring theme, and I believe not just between the Department and the Committee of the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, but a recurring theme between all of our executive departments, or indeed most of them, and their respective committees. And let me repeat what I have said in committee. We are there to scrutinise, and that is not to be conflated with criticise. When you scrutinise, you then turn around and support and praise the Department for its work. So I do not understand why it is that we are getting late papers, particularly with regard to core financial information. Anyway, at the meeting, the Department advised its opening resource budget was £73.9 million, a reduction of around £6 million compared with last year's figures. The Department also highlighted it was a particularly challenging allocation for this year due to additional pressures on the Department. However, Deputy Speaker, at the same 29th of May meeting, I think it's fair to say that not one member of the committee could claim with any confidence to fully understand the financial info as presented. So I would say to you, Deputy Speaker, there are two issues for the Minister to address, one being timeliness, the other being clarity. One of the additional pressures I've just mentioned is in relation to the inquiry into historical institutional abuse. The committee was advised during the committee stage of the bill that costs were estimated at between 15 and 19 million over the lifetime of the inquiry, and the necessary funds would be made available despite there being no baseline within the budget. And I believe the June monitoring round will see a bid put forward by the Department of some £3.8 million. There is also an issue with regard to the regeneration of former military sites, particularly Shackleton Barracks, where there is no baseline for ongoing security and maintenance costs, which are significant for such a large site. The committee was advised it costs around £500,000 to £600,000 per annum in terms of security, maintenance and indeed pumping, as the site is below the waterline. Again, there's a capital bid in the June monitoring round for £1.3 million to cover the costs of those sites gifted by the Ministry of Defence in the Hillsborough Agreement. There will also be significant expenditure in relation to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister's recent statement regarding together building a united community. Junior Minister Bell mentioned on BBC television a figure of some £500 million over the next couple of years. Again, that's something the committee will take a view on in the coming months. The committee will also continue to monitor the various executive funds, such as the Social Investment Fund and the Childcare Fund, to ensure that spending is both targeted and outcome-based. Deputy Speaker, to speak now as a member of the House rather than the Chair of the Committee, I did mention the bid in the June monitoring round for the historical institutional abuse inquiry. It is crucial that this inquiry is appropriately funded, and there are concerns about the current support. Junior Minister Bell in question time talked about the 2 hours provided by WAVE in terms of counselling. The committee has had approaches from those who have already engaged with the inquiry, and with your permission I'll just read into the records a couple of quotes. The first from somebody on behalf of a female who attended the inquiry. This witness says that she hasn't been well lately because of there being no support services or counselling in place after she came from the inquiry, just like many others before and after her. We will be fighting for support services for more than the 2 hours offered on a Friday morning, and to have a clinical psychologist, somebody who genuinely understands and can help victims come through their pain. Another witness, and this is a man who did attend the HIA inquiry, and then was trying to seek counselling, appropriate counselling. He writes, "I didn't want to do Tuesday, and I asked for Thursdays. But she didn't want to lose money not seeing me on Tuesday, so it seemed that her money was more important than I was. She had the gall to say, 'Come up to the Ormeau Road to talk on Thursday.' The cheek of it. That's where I suffered so badly with nuns. I was shocked and sickened and felt so alone. Help is what I need, not none." And I hope the Minister will take those testimonies on board as the June monitoring round and further financial costs come to his door in terms of the historical institutional abuse inquiry. And indeed, as Jonathan Bell, Junior Minister, said, there are those who have suffered in a non-institutional setting. And again, I make the plea to the Minister to think of making funding available to fund a second process. I know Junior Minister Bell says you can go to the PSNI or you can go to the social services, but why do we have an inquiry? And the first thing that happens when you knock the door and say, "I was abused," why is the first thing that happens? The person at the door shows you a list of venues and says, effectively, "Were you abused at one of these venues? If the answer is yes, come in, we will help you. But if the answer is no, I was abused somewhere else," the door, metaphorically, is slammed in your face and you're told, "Try the PSNI or try the social services." There's a basic inequality there, Deputy Speaker. In terms of the military sites, I wonder if the Minister could make clear at what point somewhere like Shackleton will cost us more to maintain than it would cost us to sell. I understand there was some attempt to value with a view to selling the Shackleton barracks. Surely at £500,000 to £600,000 a year, the time will come quite rapidly when it's cost the Executive more to hold it than it would have to say to the MOD, "Thank you, but no thank you, will not bother." On the Social Investment Fund, it was originally 80 million over 4 years. It now appears to be 80 million over 2 years. I'd welcome clarity from the Minister on the spending patterns. And will the full 80 million be spent within the time frame of the CSR? And will it be spent in an equitable manner? We also, in lieu of the Social Investment Fund last year, had the announcements for the 6 signature projects. Can you tell us how much has been spent and what the spending profile is for those over the next couple of years? The childcare strategy has been mentioned by at least one member, £12 million effectively in the bank. Very little of it spent, but up to 50% of it allocated before the production of a strategy. And of course, the big issue, together building a united community. What are the spending plans? Where will the money come to fund that? I have, Mr Deputy Speaker, the OFM-DFM resource budgets, CSR 10 by programme here. This is something, just to read into the record, provided to the committee by the Departmental Assembly Liaison Officer, who says it's the initial 4-year budget of 2010 and they're attached at Annex A. And this is Annex A, Deputy Speaker. The Community Relations Council has a budget year on year of around £3.5 million. Can the Minister make clear the implications of that budget line with the introduction of the proposed Equality and Good Relations Committee? Will the budget for this new body impact on the £3.5 million for the Community Relations Council? The Attorney-General gets an uplift of £250,000. Is there any particular reason why Mr Larkin needs more money? We also have the Peace Building and Conflict Resolution Centre. We heard in the briefing that it was going to cost £650,000 per annum by subvention. Deputy First Minister told this House it could generate a profit of £1 million. Finally, Deputy Speaker, in this Annex A of resource budgets, for this year and for next, but not in the previous 2 years of the CSR, there is a budget line for a public assemblies, parades and protest body. That's the phrase that came out of Hillsborough when they attempted to sort out parading. When the DUP and Sinn Féin said, "Leave it to us, we'll come up with a new way of doing it." What they were proposing was a public assemblies, parades and protest body. And they have budgeted £2.2 million for that body this year, £2.390 next year. That's £4.5 million for a body that does not exist. Perhaps the Minister will explain that in his closing comments.
And I call